Hey, welcome back to the Personality Hacker Podcast. My name is Joel Markwitt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge. And we've been doing a series of podcasts on our relationship with money, wealth generation, how we should see resource. And for this last, this has been like a short series, and this is going to be basically sort of the final podcast in this short series. Not that we'll never talk about it, wealth generation or resource again. Sure. But for this particular series, what we wanted to do was grab what we thought was one of the most not optimistic, but like encouraging components out of a program that we did called Hardwired for Wealth. Now, the program of Hardwired for Wealth is all about understanding wealth generation through the lens of individual personality types, because we don't believe all personality types make money the same way. And unfortunately, when it comes to, advice and programs and books all about wealth generation or self-made wealth, they're going to generally reflect how the writer themselves or the personality type of the writer generated wealth. And so people will purchase these programs or books or whatever. And if they have specific, concrete, actionable items, for some people, it's going to be spot on and exactly what they needed, and they're going to do great. And for other people, they're going to be like, I don't know why I keep failing. Why did it not work for me? Look at all these other great testimonials of people who did, that worked fantastic for them. And for some reason, it's not working for me. And so, that doesn't apply to, books maybe that have a more, intuitive, abstract umbrella concept of money, like Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, which is more of a concept. But if it's about specific wealth generation and if there's no acknowledgement that people make money in a different way, then some people are going to, take it, run with it, do great, and other people are going to crash and burn, and they might blame themselves, they might blame the program, who knows? But it's generally just that guy and that personality type made money that way. And for that personality type and type similar to them, it's going to be great. And for other people, it's not going to be so great. So what we did with Hardwired for Wealth is we took examples, and the component that we want to wrap all of this up in is we took examples of people of different personality types and how they haven't just done well for themselves, but they have amassed extraordinary resource. And the reason why we think it's so important is, and a great way to sort of tie up this whole conversation is, we want, no matter who you are, we want you to understand that you are hardwired for wealth. You have wiring inside of you that lends toward wealth generation. And it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what personality type you are. So this is not like, this is not going to be like, hey, if you're an ISFP, go out for these careers, or if you're an ENTJ, these are the jobs you should be getting. This is more like, hey, I don't care what type you are, there's some dude or some woman of your exact same type that has just made a dump truck full of money, and you can do that too. So we wanted to go through some examples of people who have generated extraordinary wealth and talk about their personality types and how people of the same personality type can maybe use them as a model for wealth generation in their own lives.
Yeah, this is a very inspirational show today, where we're going to talk about, maybe some of the specifics that people have generated wealth. But basically, like Antonia said, I want to echo this. Like, everybody has a path to wealth creation, resource creation, management, all of this. And oftentimes what we see, not just in wealth generation, in all personal development stuff, is it's not a one-size-fits-all. You're going to go about it in your unique way, and that's really important to think about. If you try to do it the way your neighbor does it, or the guy down the street does it, or that really successful whoever in your industry does it, and you're not of the same personality type, or you just don't have the same talents or the same way of doing things, you're going to probably not have a good time of it, and you're going to be like, oh, I can't do this, I'm such a failure. Don't get discouraged. There is hope, because it just might not be that is your path. There might be another way you go about it in a much different fashion.
Yeah. So what we wanted to do is, we're not actually going to take like the 16 Myers-Briggs personality types. We're more going to look at what we call the cognitive functions. Now, if you haven't been on the Personality Hacker blog yet and read any of the articles around cognitive functions, I recommend taking some time to do that. Just go to Personality Hacker, in the search field, put the phrase cognitive functions, and you'll get all sorts of great blog posts about what cognitive functions are, how they work, and what is called the CARM model. Now, just to make it super simple for the purposes of this particular podcast, every single personality type has a specific cognitive function, or what could be called a mental process, or basically the wiring of your mind, how your mind is basically hardwired, which is why we use the phrase hardwired for wealth. The hardwiring of your mind has a first point of entry that we call your dominant cognitive function, or your driver mental process. This is your go-to tool in your toolbox. This is the lens through which you see all of life. And understanding our type based on our wiring or our cognitive functions is far more powerful than just knowing what your 4-letter Myers-Briggs type is. Honestly, your 4-letter Myers-Briggs type was meant to be a decoder ring to get you to the point of your cognitive functions. A lot of people don't know that or understand it. And if this is the first time you've ever heard that, I highly recommend looking up cognitive functions on the Personality Hacker blog. It'll break a lot of this down for you. That said, we want to talk about how people are wired, mentally wired, not just their personality type, but they're mentally wired for wealth generation. So we're going to look at it through the lens of those cognitive functions. And what we're going to do is we're going to take, because there's only 8 cognitive functions, there's 16 Myers-Briggs type, but only 8 functions. And that's because your Myers-Briggs type is a combination of 2 of those in a specific configuration. So if you've got 8 mental processes and you take 2 of those 8 as your wiring, and then you either, one of those is your driver and the other one's your co-pilot, and then you reverse them, you do the math, it turns out to be 16 different Myers-Briggs types. If I lost everybody, my apologies. There's a little barrier of entry to get from, the idea of cognitive functions to the idea of Myers-Briggs types and vice versa. So again, go to the blog. And we might actually do a podcast on this soon. I was thinking, we haven't done a podcast on the car model or these functions, so it might be really good to do a podcast.
Absolutely.
We'll probably do a podcast in the future. That said, in the meantime, again, we're just going to be focusing on this mental wiring that each of the Myers-Briggs types uses. And so we'll make it easy for you. We'll break it down as we go. But if we're looking at wealth generation through personality types, understand that this is a slightly different way of going about it than just looking at the 16 types.
One thing to remember here when we're talking about personality type is oftentimes people are looking at behaviors and drawing a personality type from a behavior. We're not talking about behaviors. We're actually talking about the wiring of your mind. So this is what informs your behavior, because 2 people of 2 different personality types might exhibit the same behavior, but it's why are they exhibiting that behavior is important. And then when we get down to the wiring level of your mind, that's what's actually going on underneath the surface. You're learning information, you're making decisions based on these technically called cognitive functions. And those decisions you make obviously emerges behavior, but that behavior is not what we're looking at. We're looking at the wiring of your mind specifically.
Yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through all eight of these cognitive functions and talk about which personality types utilize them. And then we're going to talk about examples of people who have amassed extraordinary wealth, and they've done it on their own. This is not like trust fund babies. These are not people who inherited wealth. These are people who generated their own extraordinary wealth, and they did it by using their cognitive functions. So the first cognitive function we want to talk about is a process called memory. Now, memory is used, its technical name is introverted sensing, and it's used by all SJs in the Myers-Briggs system, so all sensor judgers. So this would be ESTJs, ISTJs, ESFJs, and ISFJs. They all use a mental process that we call memory. Now, memory is very much about being in touch with concrete reality that we have had time to ruminate on or understand the world through our captured memories, our impressions of the world. We have a sensory experience, and then we integrate that sensory experience and think about it later and ruminate on it later. And that's how memory works. It's a learning process that captures information and then later on thinks about it, so sort of going, what lessons can I take from this? What can I learn from this now that I've had a chance to really ruminate on it?
Well, at the same time, it's taking in new information and comparing it to the memories of old information to reconcile, to say, does this match my previous experience? Mm-hmm. Is this something that I can resonate with? Have I ever encountered this type of thing before? And if I have, where does that fit in my categories internally for me?
Right. And so, as you can imagine, this tends to be a past-oriented learning process, like the timeline of this process tends to very much look towards the past. And so it becomes very traditional. It's very much about safety and security. And what's interesting about this is you would think, well, don't most wealth generators need to be mavens? Don't they need to be people who like come up with new ideas and new concepts? Like, how could somebody who's really looking to the past, how could they be somebody who has generated a lot of wealth? And one of our favorite examples of a person using the memory process that has amassed extraordinary wealth is Martha Stewart. Martha Stewart leads with a process called memory. And she's had more influence on how Americans eat, entertain, decorate houses and gardens than anyone in history. Because it's all about, she's basically turned homesteading and traditions and holidays and decorating and, you know, eating, that sort of thing. Like, she's basically taken all that and turned it into an extraordinary industry. And her net worth is about $1 billion. Now, she's even had like tax issues. She went to prison for a small amount of time. Like, it wasn't like the whole thing was not a bumpy ride. But she took her wiring, her mental wiring of understanding tradition and the value of tradition and understanding what people want in their homes when they're nesting. She took an understanding of that and turned it into something that could be replicatable. And so she generated an empire, really. So Martha Stewart is one of our favorite examples of how people who are hardwired with the memory process can amass extraordinary amounts of wealth.
So the next mental process we've nicknamed sensation. And the technical term for this is extroverted sensing, if you're a Myers-Briggs geek or if you know what we're talking about. But sensation is basically the mental process that is in real time. It's taking in sensory information in the present moment. It's very concerned about what is happening right now. And so oftentimes sensation people that use this process, and this is going to be 4 of the Myers-Briggs types, so ESFP, ISFP, ESTP, ISTP types are going to use sensation. All of these types are looking at the world and taking in information in real time, and they're usually very good at understanding things through their 5 senses and their other senses that are beyond their 5 senses, you know, temperature, balance, things of this nature, where they are engaging with the world, the external world, through their sensory experience. So you can see that if memory is focused on looking to the past because you're reconciling new information coming in on things you've already experienced, sensation's about the very present moment. It's about, what is this doing for me right now? What am I seeing and engaging with at this moment in time? I'm not really looking at the past as much. I'm not even concerned about the future as much. I'm concerned about the present moment. What is my sensory experience right now?
Because sensation is about sensory experience right here, right now, adrenaline comes into it as a factor for sensation people. Oftentimes they actually end up as things like athletes, people who are very good at, you know, have high kinesthetic intelligence. But what's fascinating about them as people who like adrenaline is that the people who generate a lot of wealth using the sensation process are frequently people who are attracted to things that will juice them up in the moment. And they're not too attached to the outcome. They're more performing through what's happening. So our favorite example of somebody using sensation as a wealth creator is Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump is known for the art of the deal. One of the things that he has been the best at is generating wealth in real estate by making extraordinary deals in the moment, in the boardroom, making a crazy deal. And a part of that is because he's not too attached to the outcome. It is the adrenaline of the moment of making the deal. And so he's gotten away with some really crazy deals that were massively beneficial to him because he was performing through the moment and he was getting the other person excited about a deal that was inspirational to them because he was doing it through adrenaline and through the moment and not being too attached to the outcome. Now, Donald Trump is worth about $3.5 billion. And what's fascinating about him is that he hasn't had an easy go of it. He was bankrupt at a certain point, but he was able to pick himself back up. And part of the reason he's been so good at what he does is because he just stays in the game, right? Like he loves the adrenaline rush of generating wealth and making those deals. It's more about the deal than it is about the money.
Absolutely. And other industries this might pop in are like account managers at like an ad agency who are great at like building relationships in real time and getting people to sign on the dotted line. Like deal makers. This is really a deal maker process often. Now, not always, but often. And you can see somebody that is an athlete also might generate a lot of wealth. And it's because they have this process and they've just perfected maybe the game of basketball or golf or whatever they do to the degree that they get endorsements now. So there's a couple different ways of doing this. And obviously Donald Trump is going down the business route of being that deal maker in real time and getting people excited and closing those deals.
Yeah, and you see a lot of like artists fall into, like performers fall into the category of being a sensation person that makes a lot of money, but it's generally through performance. So if you're a sensation person, you're asking, how am I hardwired for wealth? You're actually, just like Martha Stewart is hardwired for nesting. She's hardwired for tradition and for generating a beautiful environment. And she was able to take that natural talent that she's hardwired for and turn it into a business, an empire, really. Donald Trump did the same thing. He's hardwired for performance. He's hardwired to be an adrenaline junkie in the moment. He's hardwired for deal making and not really thinking about the money. The money comes later. And so he took that and turned it into an empire as well. So the third process we want to talk about is a process that we call perspectives. And for those of you who know cognitive functions, the technical name is introverted intuition. Now, introverted intuition is the mental process or the learning process that all NJs in the Myers-Briggs system use. So INTJs, ENTJs, INFJs, and ENFJs. And they're using the perspectives process to pattern recognize how people think. All right, that's why we called it the perspectives process, because it's an ability to be a little divorced from your own perspective in order to watch your mind form patterns. We talked about this when we discussed intuition in our series on intuition. There's an entire podcast on the difference between extroverted intuition and introverted intuition, or what we call exploration and perspectives. So I recommend going and referencing that if you want more of an insight into the perspectives process. Now, one of our favorite examples of somebody using perspectives to amass extraordinary wealth is Charlie Munger, who is the right-hand man of Warren
Buffett.
Buffett, thank you. I was about to say Warren Spector, but I'm like, I know that's not right.
No, Warren Buffett, yeah.
Why? This is the second time I've lost Warren Buffett's name in a podcast. Why is that name eluding me so much?
I think because his name harkens to an all-you-can-eat food arrangement. So it's confusing.
It might be. It might be that I'm always like hungry and I'm like, Buffett, that's not right. I'm just hungry. So Charlie Munger is the right-hand man of Warren Buffett, and he has used his perspectives process to be able to anticipate trends. Now, perspectives is, if memory is past-oriented and sensation is present-oriented, perspectives is future-oriented. And perspectives is hardwired to be able to predict trends. And that's what Charlie Munger has done. He's been able to predict trends enough to know whether or not something is a sound investment or not. And as the vice chairman of Berkshire Hathaway, he started as a real estate attorney, but stopped to work on investment management full time. And he is now worth $1.75 billion.
He's worth a lot of money.
Yeah, crazy, cray money. And what's so great is, again, it's not about him being hardwired specifically to have people hand him dollar bills. He's hardwired to see trends. And so he took his natural hardwired ability of being able to see trends and poured it into an industry where being able to anticipate trends and seeing what a great long-term investment is, where that is ideally suited for him.
Now, you can also see the perspectives process from a creator standpoint. So this is somebody, Charlie Munger is somebody who's looking at trends over time. But if you think about, maybe an author who creates an entire world. Your brother's an author, and he's done this. He's a perspectives person. Mm-hmm. He's created an entire universe, an entire world for all the novels he and his writing partner have created that he uses perspective process to develop. Mm-hmm. So this can also be a very creative process to construct giant timelines, a lot of characters, entire worlds and systems that are running that he imagined out of basically thin air, and he created these. So you can see there's another path here as well as being creative, not just being good at like business as an alternative for wealth generation. The fourth process we want to talk about is a nickname we call exploration. The technical term is extroverted intuition. And this is the four Myers-Briggs types that use this are all NPs. So ENFPs, INFPs, ENTPs, INTPs will use the process of exploration. And exploration, if perspectives is introverted pattern recognition, or it's pattern recognition over timelines and thinking about how people think, extroverted intuition or exploration is about pattern recognition in the real world, kind of in real time. It's like pushing buttons over here and messing with our environment over here and seeing what connections happen, making real-time connections very quickly, quick connections, and seeing how things stick. Like I almost imagine people throwing spaghetti on the wall, seeing what sticks type environment. And oftentimes we use the great illustration. If you talk to an exploration person, you hold up a salt shaker and a coffee cup and say, these two items are getting married, which is the male, which is the female. Usually an exploration person will be able to answer almost instantly, like, oh, well, that's the male, that's the female, they're getting married, blah, blah, blah. They just have an answer for that because they make really quick connections of disparate things fast. One of our favorite examples of someone who's amassed a lot of wealth using the exploration process is Ashton Kutcher. Now, Ashton Kutcher is a actor in Hollywood. He started off on that 70s show. He was a model, I guess, and then he went to the 70s show, and he built a resume of being an actor, but now he's into business investing. He owns an ad agency / investment company where he is pattern recognizing how the industries of Hollywood and Silicon Valley are merging, and they're merging rapidly. And he's out in front of it using his credibility as an actor and all the work he's done there to now pattern recognize, okay, how is Silicon Valley and Hollywood going to start merging in the next few years? And so he's investing in companies, and he's putting his attention and time into companies, and he's amassed a tremendous amount of wealth through doing this because he's using that exploration process to connect things that aren't naturally connected, but he's making those connections. So it's really exciting.
Yeah, he's worth about $140 million right now, but he's pretty much on his path to becoming a billionaire. Is projected to become a billionaire in the next 10 years. And what's really fascinating about Ashton Kutcher is how many people underestimated him. And he's the one that's laughing all the way to the bank. What's great about the exploration process is that it's very much about what ifs, right? It's pattern recognition through asking what ifs. And so it ends up becoming very focused on novelty and new things. And Ashton Kutcher got in early on Skype, Spotify, Airbnb. Like, he was about new technologies coming up. Now, versus, say, Charlie Munger, that they were like looking at very solid investments, that they could see trends over time, but it was very much about a solid real estate investment. Ashton Kutcher is a little bit more like, yeah, let's go ahead and see if this brand new thing, right, this brand new novelty will take off. And because he's been good at pattern recognition, he's hardwired for novelty and seeing solid novel pattern recognition. He has been able to get in early on some of the major big players in new tech. So it's a great example of somebody utilizing the exploration process, being hardwired for exploration, to be able to know exactly where to put their money and time and investments and to have it pay off for them.
What about traditional business people, though, right? Like the people that you have this image of the guy sitting in the big leather chair smoking the cigar that's running a major corporate, company. There's a path for wealth for those type of people also. In fact, there's a mental process that we've nicknamed called effectiveness. That, again, that was an image that don't get tied to that. But that's, a lot of people are like, they assume that that's the wealthiest person ever. But there is a mental process that we've nicknamed effectiveness. Its technical definition is extroverted thinking. And there's 4 Myers-Briggs types. All of the TJs in the Myers-Briggs system will have this. So ENTJ, ESTJ, INTJ, ISTJ will all be using the mental process of effectiveness to create wealth in some way. And effectiveness is about what the question effectiveness is asking is what works. What gets the job done? What gets that deliverable at the end of the day? The bottom line, I want it to be done. At the end of the day, I want it to work. And they value all the things that will get something to work to the end result that they want. And so oftentimes effectiveness people are really good at laying out great project management timelines. They understand how to manage resource and manipulate resource. They understand how to talent scout and put the right people on the bus on the team.
And systems.
It's systems thinking. They're great at running systems and establishing systems. It's probably an effectiveness person that came to every small town in America and said, we need fire hydrants so that our fire companies aren't just having to carry buckets to put out fire all the time. Let's build a system for this so when there's a fire, they can hook into the fire hydrant and put out that fire. So this is the effectiveness process. One of the favorite effectiveness people that we have is Jack Welch, who was the CEO of General Electric for many years. And he came into General Electric at a time when it was struggling, and he really turned it around because he was looking to increase the bottom line. He was looking to get the effective thing done, which is to make GE profitable and grow profitability. And so he was focused on this, and he basically led the company into a $60 billion a year company during his tenure there. And now he's worth, $750 million is his net worth or something of this nature, probably even more than that at this point. It's grown. And that's because he was using this process of effectiveness. He was the right guy to come in. And you notice something about this. He didn't start anything. He came in and managed something through his effective process, and he added value to that company over time by managing it well, creating great systems, hiring the right people, firing the people that didn't work out, and orchestrating General Electric into a profitable company. Now, whether or not you agree with his ethics, that's a whole different story, but he is somebody who did bring GE into a profitable company through his effectiveness process.
Yeah. The next process we want to talk about is a process that we've nicknamed accuracy. Its technical name is introverted thinking. Introverted thinking is about what makes logical and analytical sense. Now, what's interesting about this process is it is also very interested in systems. It's more about sort of being a mechanic, though. It's not about creating a system that can be managed. It's more about taking the best stuff of all of these different components and putting them together to create a new machine, right? It's very mechanically oriented, and it understands how all these different parts work in real time. Now, it also is an attempt to root out incongruities and inconsistencies. And so it's quite an honest process. It's very much about how can we be honest with ourselves. And one of our favorite examples of a wealth generator using accuracy is Tony Hsieh, the CEO of a company called Zappos. Now, Zappos was recently sold in the last few years to Amazon for $1.2 billion. And I think Hsieh made out with about 214 million of that. And what's fantastic about the way that Tony Hsieh has been a CEO of Zappos is that he was just honest with himself and said, I think I'm miserable in most of the jobs I'm at, and I'm not okay with that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on company culture, and I'm going to try to make it as pleasurable as possible. And I'm going to mix the system of human happiness with the system of customer service, right? And I'm going to recognize that these are all part of a big system. And it makes sense to me that if my employees are happy, that's going to translate to my customers. So he focused more on his employees than he did on the bottom line. He focused more on his employees than he did on the customer because he figured it would filter out to them. And so he took Zappos and turned it into $1 billion company. And so he's now worth about $450 million. So we love Tony Hsieh, as an example of accuracy. Now, again, I just want to reiterate, these people are not hardwired specifically to have people hand them dollar bills. They're hardwired to do one thing spectacularly well, or a handful of things spectacularly well, and they were able to translate those natural hardwired talents into a company culture.
Just want to illustrate or just highlight the fact that accuracy as a process, the nickname accuracy, is represented by all the TP types in the Myers-Briggs system. So the INTP, the ISTP, the ENTP, or the ESTP will be using accuracy.
Thank you. I totally spaced that.
Just so people can put themselves on this scale, know where they stand on it. The next mental process we're going to talk about is we've nicknamed harmony. The technical definition of harmony is extroverted feeling. Our nickname is harmony because extroverted feeling is very much concerned about the emotions of the group. the emotions and the well-being and the needs of people and the people that are in their sphere, and sometimes the people that even aren't in their sphere as they begin to mature and develop. And one of the things that, by the way, the four types that have harmony as their mental process would be all of the FJ types. So ENFJ, INFJ, ESFJ, ISFJ will be using the harmony process. And if this is you, one of the things you're going to be looking at is getting you're asking the question, what will get people's needs met? What will get everyone's needs met? How can I best service everyone and make sure they're taken care of? And this often comes up in industries like hospitality, the restaurant, service industries. Obviously, healthcare would be a big part of this because that's getting people's needs met, meeting needs. One of our favorite examples, though, in business for wealth generation using the harmony process is Oprah Winfrey. Oprah has basically created an entire media empire in facilitating conversation, and I believe that conversation is facilitated around getting needs met. So she's also been a kingmaker of people like Dr. Phil and Dr. Oz, who are all about mental health and physical health. And she's now delving into areas and realms of spiritual health because this is getting humanity's needs met. The people, her audience that are watching her programs, that are a part of her media network, are seeing the things that she does to help meet their needs. And this is how she's been able to generate a mass amount of wealth through all of this.
So the last mental process that we want to talk about is a process we called authenticity. And the technical name for authenticity is introverted feeling. This would be a process used by all feeler perceivers in the Myers-Briggs system, so all FPs. This would be INFPs, ENFPs, ISFPs, and ESFPs. And I think in particular, I want the INFPs and the ISFPs to really hear what we're saying, not just hear it, but like hear this, because I think a lot of INFPs and ISFPs feel like they're hardwired for the opposite of wealth. Yeah. They're hardwired to like never know what they want to be doing, and they can struggle with wealth generation. But what's fascinating is that the person we're going to talk about that leads with the authenticity process is worth the most of everybody we're about to talk, or everybody we've talked about already, and that is Richard Branson.
Yeah, Richard Branson made his wealth by starting Virgin Records back in the 1970s, where it was a mail order record company. They would deliver records kind of like Netflix style, because you didn't rent them, you bought them, and they would deliver them to you, and it was cheap to do that. And so he had a group of 20-somethings with him. And if you read his autobiographical writings, like in Losing My Virginity, his autobiography, he talks about the early days. It was like a commune they were living in, running this business. It was very freeform, very, not many systems. There were no like record keeping of the finances. They just had like a jar with money in it, and they were just fulfilling record orders as they went. And it was a very interesting start. And then through Richard Branson's inspiration, he attracted talent that then put systems in place and helped him think about business in like system terms. But he's always maintained his inspirational nature. And that's how he's built, I think he's got like 200 to 300 companies now, ranging from anywhere from cell phones and healthcare to insurance to airplanes to records and music. I mean, retail. He's all over the place with these different industries. And it's because he's inspiring to people. People see Richard Branson and he's an inspiration to them. Even people outside of his companies and industries are inspired by him. I want to meet him. He's inspiring to me to read about what he's done and who he is.
You can definitely see that it was a very different style of business in the early days than, say, the Jack Welch, CEO of General Electric, go in and create a system. Richard Branson did it his own way. And there was a lot of, as you mentioned, there's like jars of money that they use for office supplies. In the early days, it felt like it was very much about like, bubblegum and toothpick solutions. And yet, because of his inspirational nature and because it was important to him, they kept going. Like there were awkward moments in the generation of the early business, but he just kept going because it was important to him. So what I love about Richard Branson, and he's worth, have we said his net worth? He's worth $5 billion. That's more than anybody else that we've talked about. And so what's really inspiring, I think, about people like Richard Branson is it shows that he's not hardwired to have people hand him dollar bills. He's hardwired to be in alignment with his values, to go ahead and take risks, to do things his way, to push through, even though situations are tough because he believes in it, and to be inspirational. So he used his natural hardwiring in order to generate massive wealth.
And I just want to also make the comment that if you're somebody like an ISFP or even an INFP, and the idea of being in business and like running a company doesn't appeal to you, there are artistic ways to do the similar things. I mean, our speculation is that Michael Jackson also would use the process of authenticity. And Michael Jackson was one of the wealthiest performers on the planet at one point.
Yeah.
So with all of this, and I know we have a lot of people that are listening that are creative class people. They're people that are creative, they're designers, artists, musicians, they are intuitives most likely, and they have a creative bent. So I want you to know that even being a creative person, there's ways to create wealth as well. These are just some examples of business people that might be your personality type or use the mental process that you use that have amassed large amounts of wealth. That's a very difficult phrase to say. And it just shows that everybody has this potential if this is something you want. But also there's creative ways to do it as well, whether it's creating that story, the Harry Potter series and making $1 billion from that, or if it's being a performer on stage like Michael Jackson. There are alternative ways of creating amounts of wealth that are unique to you. So don't get pigeonholed into anything.
Yeah, we think of wealthy people, like you said, you've got that guy sitting in the leather armchair with smoking a pipe.
Yeah.
And he's, invested in companies, or he's, whatever our stereotype in our mind is about wealth generation. You can do it on your own terms and utilizing your natural wiring. And if you noticed as we went through all these functions, you probably heard your Myers-Briggs type mentioned twice, because all 8 of these processes, only one type is going to lead, or only 2 types are going to lead with these, but they're also going to have what we call a co-pilot, or a supplemental and auxiliary process that will also influence how you generate wealth. So like for me, I'm an ENTP. I lead with a process called exploration, which was Ashton Kutcher's, but I also supplement it with a process called accuracy, which was Tony Hsieh's. So I'm going to be somewhere between Ashton Kutcher and Tony Hsieh when I'm looking at ways that I'm going to generate wealth. I'm going to be a little bit that exploration, new technology, new way of doing things, combined with creating systems that are radically honest, just like Tony Hsieh did with accuracy. And I'm going to combine them together and go, how am I going to generate wealth as an ENTP using both exploration and accuracy? And how can I utilize my natural wiring in order to generate resource for myself? So you probably heard your type mentioned twice, and grab both examples. If you're an INFJ, you heard us talk about Charlie Munger, and you heard us talk about Oprah. What's in between Charlie Munger and Oprah? If you're an INFP, you heard us talk about authenticity with Richard Branson and exploration with Ashton Kutcher. Those are going to be your types. So what's somewhere between Richard Branson and Ashton Kutcher? So just understand that you are hardwired to have really amazing skills or amazing talents that you can build skill upon. And that hardwiring will lend itself to being your source of revenue, of your resource generation.
Absolutely. We've got more writings about this on our website. We'd invite you to, if this is resonating with you, to try out our Hardwired for Wealth course, because it goes into much more depth on this, and it really gets into specifics of your personality type based on your test results, and how you can, as your personality, think about generating wealth and what it means to generate wealth for you. So I'd invite you to do that. And at the very least, we want to see you over at the Personality Hacker website, personalityhacker.com, and leave a comment, ask a question, give us some feedback about this concept. What are some things you're thinking about around wealth generation? Where is your relationship? As we're wrapping up this short series on money and wealth and resource and value, what is coming up for you? What are some emergent questions? What are some thoughts you're having around some of this that can add to the discussion and can help move this dialogue forward? Because we think that this is a great place for you to grow as a person, is through resource creation, resource management, wealth creation, wealth management. We think it's a great growth tool as a person.
You can also rate us on iTunes, which I'm always reminding people of. Come rate us on iTunes, subscribe to the podcast. We would love to have you as a regular part of this conversation. And yeah, please send us feedback, dialogue, questions. We're handling questions now in a supplementary podcast. So please shoot us any questions you have, and you might be able to hear your question live on the air.
Absolutely. You can also find us at facebook.com/personalityhacker or twitter.com/personalityhack, HACK. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
We will talk to you on the next Personality Hacker Show.